think we've all seen over the last several years how important, I'm going to use the acronym, hourly cost maintenance programs have been to the value of the aircraft and also to owners of the aircraft. And that evolution of the importance of the maintenance program is something we're going to talk about today. We have representatives here from GE, Rolls-Royce, Pratt & Whitney, Honeywell, JSSI, and Tony to keep us all straight with Asset Insight. We don't have much time, and we are going, when we met earlier, we decided that this audience is a very sophisticated audience, understands the basics of hourly cost maintenance programs, so we're not covering the basics. We're going to dive into a little more detail and hopefully answer some questions that are relevant to you and your involvement with HCMPs. So for the first question, we're going to skip you, Tony, and then come back to you at the end. And that question is, how has the type of coverage under the HCMP evolved over the last several years? Nicole, we'll start with you and just go straight down the line.
I took the second seat thinking I'd be second, but so good afternoon, Nicole Kappos from Pratt & Whitney, Canada. So I think over the last 2 days, we've referred to the notion of customer experience or user experience, and also the notion of connectivity. And at Pratt Canada, these are just two of the features that we've incorporated in our engine maintenance programs. With the recent entry into service of the Gulfstream 500, which is powered by the PW800 program, we went out to the market and asked our customers what was important to them, what would improve the customer experience. And with, a lot of, spent probably, over 2 years working with some advisory groups with Gulfstream and some focus groups. And what came out of it was 3 customer-centric pillars of what we've introduced on our recent programs. And the first one being premium services, and I'll talk a little bit about that later. Investment protection, which was very key, and maximized availability for which this target market is also very important. The PW800 engine is an on-condition engine, so what that means is that a lot of our major engine events are shifted to the right. So what that asks for is many more services that are on wing. So this is why we also stepped up the bar when it came to premium services, and offered a very comprehensive package which included everything from a remote maintenance kit to alternate lift, and we talked about earlier about connectivity, diagnostics and prognostics, and resolving the customer issues before there's an actual issue. So those are just some of the features we've added over the last few years. The good thing that comes out of this as well, it's not only for the 800, but we've transferred many of these features to our other turbofan programs, which are powered by Dassault and Textron and Embraer. And one last thing that we've also focused on is, again, feedback from our customers, is the whole notion of residual value and transferability of the programs. So that's also been a key feature as part of the new premium services that we've offered to the market.
Hi everyone, Alan Mangels, Rolls-Royce. So I won't go into too much detail over the program. Rolls-Royce is actually celebrating 60 years in business aviation. So it's a very big milestone for us this year. I think a couple things are important to note when dealing with business aviation customers, right? Rolls-Royce has a fleet of over 3,000 aircraft powered by Rolls-Royce engines in the business aviation world, of which more than 2,000 are powered by corporate care. Having said that, over 50% of our customer base is a fleet of 1. And that's tremendously important when we're tailoring a solution for the business aviation fleet. So not to mention, of course, our investment in our authorized service centers, over 75 around the world, to support an ever-growing fleet. We've developed tons of EHM solutions internally and big data solutions to understand how our operations work out in the try and tested environment. But I think the biggest thing for us is actually a milestone change here at NBAA, which we announced, which is essentially we're incorporating nacelle coverage as well to our latest engine programs. And what that essentially means is that because we have the procurement relationship with these suppliers, we feel that it's important, and the customers requested this, to provide coverage on nacelles. And nacelles, I mean inlet cowls, doors, and thrust reverses. And before the question is asked, yes, corrosion is covered. So I think, you know, we've taken some big step changes here. We've listened to our customer, and I think it's the right time to make that shift and cover what we provide as the OEM.
I'm Greg Ryan with GE Aviation. Our hourly program is called OnPoint. And I think what we've seen in the most recent evolution of our program has been when we introduced our PHM Plus and C Focus service in 2017 for the 604, 605, and 650 Challengers. It allows us to not only monitor the aircraft, but incorporate the Focus service so that we can look at the aircraft and the engine over the entire lifespan that it's on the program and be proactive versus reactive on our maintenance, so that when you land 20 minutes later, that data is downloaded to us. We provide a report back to you if there's something that's out of parameters. Rather than you calling us, we actually call you and have our people positioned in order to support you. In addition, that data is available to the operator when they go to sell the aircraft. So you not only can have two aircraft sitting on the ramp that are identical, you can bore scope, you can pre-buy, but on the aircraft that's on OnPoint with the PHM Plus service, I can show you every flight parameter that it's operated on since it's been on the program, and overlay it on a Google map for the FOCA and give you full flight data on the aircraft. So it brings a next level of aircraft value while being on the program.
So I'm Phillip Dickerson with JSSI. Many of you may know we cover engines, airframes, and APUs, but the airframe, with some of the players exiting the parts-only market, we've introduced a parts-only product for those owners who want to worry about labor on their own. Additionally, with the ADS-B upgrades, once the aircraft is upgraded, we're adding that coverage at no extra charge on all of our airframe programs.
Hi, I'm Corey Little with Honeywell MSP. As many of you know, MSP has been around for quite a long time. This past year, we're celebrating our 41st year as an OEM engine coverage program. And really, we've kept the model very simple the entire time. It's just to have the base coverage of being 100% coverage within our gold coverage that has a few added features and benefits to that coverage, but always at the very least 100% coverage. And recently, we've taken that same model and applied it to some avionics protection plans. We have a HAP program for Honeywell avionics protection, and we also have a mechanical protection program for a lot of our ECS systems in the aircraft. And what we really, we keep the coverage, for MSP, going back to MSP, we keep the coverage levels the same. We just have added enhancements to them. And our latest enhancement, our newest enhancement is a couple of things. Number one, we started adding nacelle coverage to our legacy Embraer products, so you can get nacelle coverage for the Embraer engines. And then our newest introduction is going to be next year, where we've really tried to take this idea of the connected aircraft and apply it to what we can do for engine programs. So beginning next year, for any of our new MSP contracts or renewals, we're going to start including what's called a usage-based coverage. And this allows our users to earn or get up to a 10% discount on their MSP based on how they fly the aircraft. We use data analytics to do that, and along the way we'll calculate what your rebate would be, and then at the end of the year or during the year you can earn, like, as I said, up to 10% depending on how the aircraft is flying. So we're really trying to apply data analytics and take the savings that we realize and pass them along to the customers.
Excellent. Thanks, Corey. Tony, what do you think has been some of the most important developments in the evolution of the HCMP program over the last several years? You've been studying this a while.
Well, the marketplace has been driving a lot of it, as you can hear. But pretty much everything that's been talked about up here has been sort of market-driven or market-requested. The programs have evolved in a couple of ways, or they bring value in a couple of ways. They bring value to the asset itself, and that value increase because of the coverage is often based on how much of the fleet is covered and how appealing the program is to the people buying the aircraft. And like a lot of appraisers in this room, we track that information and can project an additional value to the aircraft once it's on a program. The second piece of this, which has been gaining dynamic value pretty much in the last few years, just in the last few years, is the over and above value that the programs provide to the operator, not just to the aircraft. And you heard some of them here today. I mean, there's everything from alternative lift to looking at covering the nacelle, to looking at downloading information automatically off of the aircraft. Those are all services that have value to the operator, and they're not to be discounted, because a lot of times those services themselves provide a greater value than the value that the program provides to the aircraft itself. For example, when the aircraft goes to trade, you know, a lot of these services allow the aircraft to trade faster. Well, just do the math. If the aircraft is depreciating at 7% a year and it sits on the market for 6 months as opposed to 30 days, think of the differential in the value, the actual value that you've lost in the airplane because you haven't enrolled it on the program. And the last piece to that is, if you do enroll it on a program, in order to be able to sell it at the time period that you're selling the aircraft, you've not gained any of the value that's been provided to the operator all along had you been enrolled all along in the program. So you've given up that value, but you still have a cost of some sort in the case of enrollment at that point, but you've lost the value on the front end.
Thanks, Tony. One thing while we're talking in general about how the programs have evolved, and this is something I'm continuing to learn about, and that is the different types of programs that are being offered by each of you. So if you don't mind, and Nicole, I'll start with you again, and you can go through the different types of programs that are offered. And what I mean by that is, how do you really set up the programs to offer to your customers? Is it a single ACMP, which I know is not the case, but as an example, or is it level 1, level 2, level 3, and if you could just describe in general how that works with Pratt & Whitney.
Thank you. So I'll just keep it at a very high level. So we have over 11,000 engines on a maintenance program, and don't forget, you know, we're diversified in 5 different markets, so beyond the corporate market, you know, there's 4 other markets that we service. So that's, you know, our motto here is, you know, a customized solution for every one of our customers. So, you know, we do offer, you know, from the pure power on the PW800 that I just spoke to you about to platinum coverage on some of our other fans. And then we have our gold and silver levels. So again, it all depends on what the customer is asking for. And, you know, we do provide them with the different levels. On the 800, you know, we've gone with one program, and it's probably the most comprehensive program in the industry today. And that we've differentiated that by just offering one level.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. Rolls-Royce actually has a slightly different strategy coming with corporate care. You know, corporate care has been in the market for over 20 years, and we actually believe in the simplicity of corporate care. In other words, we want someone like Tony to understand exactly what it means for an aircraft to be on corporate care and not have to worry about tiered levels of service. Granted, that may work for 1 customer, 2 customers, 3 customers, but for a general marketplace, especially for the financiers, for the appraisers, when it comes a transfer of an aircraft, we strongly feel that Corporate Care is a well-known brand. It covers X, and that X needs to be preserved. Now, granted, we just announced Corporate Care Enhanced because that does add a step change in coverage on the nacelle. So essentially, we wrestled with that distinction. Should we keep it the same name? Should we not? We felt it was unfair to keep it the same name because we recognize that the nacelle adds a tremendous amount of value to an aircraft, especially at a time of appraisal. So we decided that it was important to distinguish Corporate Care Enhanced by including the nacelle because that actually means dollars and cents difference at the time of appraisal of an aircraft. But honestly, down the line, hopefully as the market grows and Corporate Care Enhanced becomes the new standard, honestly, we may just go back to Corporate Care because that's really what we value is one program that fits for all of our engine types.
And the GE OnPoint is, what I would say is transparent and comprehensive. We offer one option, which is essentially a concierge type of option. So when you are going to transfer a program to another owner or you're appraising an aircraft, there are no questions as to what is covered and what is not. So, we have a no buy-in policy. We have no transfer fee policies. So we really try to make it as simplistic and convenient for our customers. When we went to the Passport on the Global 7500, GE now provides what we call the IPS, or Integrated Propulsion System. So we literally own the pylon out. So with our on-point coverage for the Global 7500, it'll not only be your engine, but it'll be the nacelle, the inlet, the thrust reversers, the LRUs. So it's a complete package. And again, it's all-inclusive, comprehensive, transparent, so that we make it convenient for our customers.
At JSSI, obviously we cover a variety of different engines, the Pratts, the Honeywell, the GE, and the Rolls engine. And we, over the years, have kind of curtailed each of those products to what our customers have told us, the various needs, whether, there's a barrier to entry where it may be a buy-in, or there's a no buy-in, or, out of the box on a brand new aircraft. One of the unique things with one, and I'll give a quick example. We had a customer years ago, and I think I can share the name, that had a CF-34 engine, so, one of the best engines ever built, was going to sell the aircraft. And when this client, who's probably a Fortune 100 company in the Northeast, went to sell it, the buyer didn't want an engine program, period. And so they were getting a brand new G550, brand new, and there was $1 million in that account. So what they were able to do was transfer that $1 million in that trust account to the cost of the hourly cost maintenance in that new G550. So that presented a, kind of a windfall for them, and everybody kind of won.
From MSP, we've been simple for 40 years. We just have one, MSP, always 100% coverage. It's very easy for everyone to understand. We get a lot of feedback in the market that people like that. They know when they hear MSP, they know exactly what's covered. And then we just have some enhancements with our MSP Gold coverage that includes AOG support. So, it's just where it has worked for so long. We've been able to maintain the brand. It's MSP is definitely known in the industry, and we have just simply added enhancements to the coverage versus adding different names to it, calling something, adding different names to it, calling something else. So it's been very successful for us. So very simple.
Thanks, Corey. So Tony, as we've just heard, there are customer-driven demands for different types of coverages, different levels of coverage, and the market has responded. How much do you take into account the level of coverage when you're evaluating the value that that program adds to the aircraft?
Yeah, we try to work as closely as possible with the providers. To be honest, I think the appraisal community in general tries to work very closely to derive the value of all of these programs. There's a couple of problems. Some of the OEMs are more forthcoming than others, so we can run into problems there, which doesn't help anybody. But the other issue that can come up is in the variety of the programs, and I know everybody drives to simplicity, but the variety of the programs over time has been misunderstood by various sectors of the market. I mean, it's not that it's not clear cut, but unless you're on top of what the OEMs, each OEM is offering, it becomes very difficult to figure out sometimes what the real coverage of the airplane is. Normally, when we run out of analytics, we assume, and we basically put it in really bold lettering, that the aircraft is 100% covered. And the reason we do that is we maximize the value of the coverage for the aircraft to give the aircraft the benefit of the doubt, if you will. Now, if we know that that's not the case, we don't do that. But not knowing what exactly the coverage might be, whether it's a pro rata coverage or whether it's some lesser coverage than full coverage, if we don't know any of that, we will assume maximum coverage on the airplane.
And I think the takeaway there is to really, for the lenders, for anybody looking at the aircraft, is to really study the program, read it, and understand what's being covered by the program. And speaking of the programs, when should you enroll? That is a key question, and the first question that you ask yourself in deciding when to enroll is whether it's even worth enrolling the aircraft in an ACMP during the warranty period. Nicole, why don't you take a crack at this one?
So that's a great question. It's often asked by our customers, when should we enroll? And we offer programs that allow our operators to enroll at any point during the aircraft life cycle. But of course, our first response to the customer is to enroll from day one. And there's probably two reasons to do so. One is, despite our warranty being quite comprehensive, it doesn't always cover all the perhaps I'd say freight and logistics and some of the ancillary charges that PPH program would cover. So that's one of the reasons. And secondly is you're building equity from day one when you're paying into a PPH program. Tony can probably speak to that, and he mentioned that earlier, that when you're on PPH from day one versus in year 5 or year 10, you've already started building your equity on the program, and the transferability of it and marketability of it also increases. We have a customer. You asked when should we? We have a customer. We have a -11 customer, so that means that we've had a PPH program that's been transferred to 11 different owners on an aircraft. So it just goes to show you the value of, at what point you can enroll onto a program.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with pretty much everything Nicole said. I think the reasons are very similar why Rolls-Royce would advocate for signing up from day one. And to be frank, over 70% of new deliveries are signed up from day one. Obviously, it's not for everyone, and we understand that. But I think, what people need to recognize is that corporate care and presumably other programs, it's not purely a maintenance program. It's not just a maintenance reserve in its classical sense. There's all the other extra additional benefits of being part of a program. In our case, Tony mentioned alternative lift, for example. Who's going to go bail you out if you have a problem, some remote location in the world? It's 24/7 operations desk ready to answer the phone to help out. It's the new AOG app that we developed for the millennials. There's a lot of things that go on behind the curtain that really you don't see until you have a problem, right? And hopefully you don't have a problem, but as we know, and if there's any directors of maintenance in here, as we know, when problems happen, unfortunately, they're quite stressful, they're quite expensive, and they quickly eat into your annual budget for cost in that year, and that makes, to be frank, everyone look bad when that happens, right? So, day one is probably the best day to start, and day 2 is the second best day to start.
Yeah, I would agree with Alan. We know that the OEM warranties have become stronger and stronger as we've progressed in the aircraft industry. But, also to be honest, things do break. They don't always break immediately after delivery. They break 2,000-3,000 hours down the road, and you do have exposure for other outside costs that are not covered by warranty. In an aircraft that's 30, 40, 60, 70 million dollars, principal is not going to want to hear that he needs another $500,000 on his brand new aircraft 2 years down the road. That being said, if you're on the on point from day one, it's a one call fix all, or with our predicts, we actually call you ahead of time to let you know so that you can schedule the aircraft to be down and not have that AOG side. Warranty is an after the fact type of situation. If you're on the program, we look at it as a predictive avoidance of that AOG or extra cost situation.
I obviously agree with all of that. I think it's interesting too over the years how, probably back in 06, 07, where when you were evaluating, back when I used to finance aircraft, you're evaluating an aircraft to finance, residual, you've got your down payment, debt service coverage, et cetera, that when you looked at Blue Book, it was always an ad if it wasn't on a program, if Tony will remember. Now it's a deduct, so it's assumed it's on a program. Interesting to kind of our situation, we cover the entire aircraft. So even out of the box, if it's brand new, you've got different warranties with completion items, with engines. This may be 2 years, this may be 3 years. We provide kind of a single source for the entire aircraft that represents the customer, not the maintenance facility or, the OEM, if you will, but basically the customer. So that's a unique perspective that we're able to apply.
Yeah, obviously I agree, from day one it's important to have them on engine programs. I think one of the things I would say is that obviously it brings immediate value to the aircraft, but I think it also brings immediate value to the people that are dealing with the aircraft, whether it's the folks that are selling them, managing them, dealing with them. From day one, it just makes life so much easier for such a complex piece of hardware. And, from our perspective, you can go to any service center, you pull in, if you have MSP coverage, the transaction is very simple. It's very simple to get, very easy to get service. And I think that's one of the big advantages and why you really want to be on it from day one. It just makes everything, so much smoother going forward.
It's not surprising to me that the answer was universal to enroll day one. So I'm going to ask the question slightly differently. Let's say I've waited until the end of the warranty period and I come to you to enroll my engine, my airframe, and what are the issues I'm going to face if I've waited that long to enroll in your program? So, Nicole, I'm coming to you, I'm done with my warranty, and I say, well, I want to pick up with your program to cover that gap now.
So when we look at enrolling someone on a program, of course, it has to have been maintained at a Pratt facility and used Pratt parts. Basically, in order to enroll, they'd have to catch up on paying the hours flown in. Other than that, we don't have a minimum hour policy. It's just paying the hours just as a catch-up.
Yeah, it's very similar to Rolls-Royce. You essentially true up the cost of what you quote-unquote owe up until that point in time. But it's a pretty seamless situation. We see it all the time. We don't require any sort of pre-inspections on the engine. So, unless there's some sort of external situation about that aircraft that we need to look at, we essentially just take a portfolio risk approach, and you buy in at that current rate, market rate, and you fly away.
For both of you, is the math really that simple? Is it just a pure catch-up as if I had enrolled day one? And
I'll say there's one major caveat. We have one engine that's calendar-driven, which is the TAE engine. It's an older engine. So unfortunately, it's not as simple as just multiplying hours by a rate, because every day that aircraft sits or flies, it's closer to its shop visit. So that's a slightly different calculation, but again, it's not very complicated. It's very transparent. The owner can see it, sees how it's calculated, and we think it's pretty fair. So.
So for OnPoint on the Challenger product, it's a little bit different. We do not require a buy-in if you come to us after alpha warranty. The rate is not the same as you had a new engine, new aircraft rate, but the difference is fairly nominal. We look at it from a portfolio managed side where we'll require an inspection of the engine, bore scope, and ground runs with a specific ITT margin. But outside of that, we do not require a buy-in on our program. So there are some operators that choose to do it that way. We would say at this point now, because of the other services we've introduced with the PHM that I've talked about earlier, that is where you're really missing. When you go to trade that aircraft down the road, you've lost that timeline of data that on a like-for-like basis of two aircraft is going to be a minus for that aircraft that wasn't on the program since new. For the Global 7500, it will be a different type program. We will either require you be on from the day one, or there will be some form of a buy-in after the aircraft's delivered if you're not on from the program.
For us, it honestly just depends on the aircraft. I think a big factor, obviously, irregardless of if it's a no buy-in type engine like the CF34, or if it's Pratt or Honeywell or Rolls-Royce engine, you're paying in tomorrow's dollars. And all these rich guys that have high tolerance for risk say, well, I can put my money elsewhere. But again, you're missing out on a lot of opportunity, a lot of coverage, a lot of support along the way, and you're also leaving yourself for risk if if an AD or service bulletin comes out on that specific type of engine that is going to change the calculus on that buy-in.
I think similar to Pratt and Rolls, we have a buy-in process. If you're out of warranty, we take a look at where the aircraft is in its life. From our perspective, we really look at catching up on the accruals for the next event. Even if it's a non-conditioned engine, we know you have a big bore scope inspection coming up, so we need to accrue some monies looking forward for when that event does occur. So we do have a buy-in.
The final point we discussed covering was the value that your programs add to the aircraft, not just to the aircraft, but to the owner of the aircraft. The value of the programs to the residual value, Tony's well-versed in that, and we've covered that in other presentations. But what value does the program that you offer provide to the owner of the aircraft above and beyond just the value to the plane? Nicole, I think you touched on this a bit with the customer experience mentioned, but you're welcome to expand on that.
So as far as what it brings to customers, I think the good news is I think as an industry we've all embraced the notion of the value of an engine maintenance program. I think the financial community has done so as well. I was having lunch with someone from Global Jet Capital, and he mentioned that they won't finance any aircraft unless it's on a maintenance program, so which is great. Aside from the financial benefits that it does bring to the owner-operator, I think we can't underestimate the marketability and the transferability part of it. So I think that's huge to the owner-operator. And at any point in time on one of the Pratt programs, if you decide that you no longer want to stay on that program, you can cash out or attain a credit for a certain percentage. So that is an additional benefit to the customer as well.
I think in the industry that we all work in, right, what's our biggest asset? It's time, right? Ariane investing, billions of dollars to save 2 hours on a flight across the Atlantic. So anything that we can do to save the owner-operator time means that we're doing a good job. And at the end of the day, that's really what corporate care does, is it saves everyone time, it saves the operator time, it saves the owner time, it gets them flying sooner. So, obviously there's the financial aspect of the accruals that go towards the next maintenance event, but really, at the end of the day, it's making it such that it's easy to operate your aircraft, and that's, I think, the biggest asset that we see.
And I would agree with that. I also think that one of the key pieces is that it gives the owner and the operator peace of mind to know that the asset will do the job it's been purchased for. Whether it's a privately held 91 aircraft or a 135, the principal wants to make sure that that investment is there when he wants it. And by having the aircraft on the program, you gain that peace of mind because of the fact that you avoid the surprises. So I think that's one of the pieces that outside of the financial part of a program gives the owner and the operator that peace of mind.
I mean, there's not much to add. Just the overall ownership experience, not just from the principal, but the guys operating the aircraft. The stress. I deal with a lot of guys that, one hiccup, and the owner could decide to sell the airplane. So a lot of them look at it as job security.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of value in predictability and making costs predictable on the most, what could be the most expensive part of your aircraft in the engine. And there's also value for lenders. I mean, when the lender knows it's on a program, they feel much more secure about it, as we found after 2008. So I think predictability has a lot of value, and that's one thing that these programs bring to owners.
Sure. I can confirm that most lenders these days require the engines to be on program, the APU to be on program. So it's not, that is not uncommon or not particular to Stonebriar. That's pretty much the market these days. Tony, I know you had some thoughts on this value add question, so I was...
Let me ask the audience a question, show of hands. How many people have actually read a new engine warranty? Show of hands. Okay. And how many of you understood what you read in the first go-around? Now, how many of you that read the warranty do you think your clients are going to understand what it says in the warranty? That's the answer as to why you need to enroll on one of these programs in day one. I mean, the reality is that most people have absolutely no clue of what their warranty truly covers. And I can tell you that what it doesn't cover is pretty amazing. For example, if you blow an engine and then ship it back to the OEM for repairs and you use the wrong truck, when it gets there, it will be scrapped because different engines require different types of shipping. Logistics is what these programs offer. Without knowledge of the proper logistics, you could end up paying doubly. So I don't even know if that's a word, but end up paying double. Yeah, it is now. I mean, the reality is that and I'm not trying to put down the value of the warranty. The warranty is very valuable. But the additional elements of these programs add so much to the operator, to the value of the operator. Logistics is huge. It's not just the cost of the freight, it's actually knowing how to ship the engine back. Mobile teams to get you to the site. I mean, who's going to take the engine off of the aircraft if you're broken down in Upper Slobovia? I guarantee you there's not going to, Joe's shop on the field isn't going to be able to help you. So who's going to bring in all the personnel to help you do that? All of these things add up, and they add up to a huge amount of money. And so when you're looking at the value of these programs relative to the aircraft, it's one thing, but you really need to also look at these programs relative to what they provide the operator. And our experience is that number is huge. And as I said, it can potentially rival the cost of a double engine overhaul, depending on the engine type and who the provider is.
And Tony, one follow-on to your point. We discussed earlier that the warranties are a declining warranty over time, right? In what the warranty is covering and the extent of coverage. And the programs fill that gap, and that gap gets wider over time. Is that correct?
Yeah, there's a gap coverage that the programs actually provide, and that gap coverage can be pretty substantial. But it's not just during the warranty period. Let's just assume for a second that you run through the warranty, you go through an overhaul on the aircraft. Most people don't know that the chances of you having an engine failure are highest within the first 200 hours following an overhaul. You know, what's it worth at that point? You know, so it doesn't really matter whether you enroll, whether you've got 1 hour on the engine or whether you've got, you know, 10 years on the engine. The reality is that there are gaps in coverage for everything, and these programs just cover the gaps. And those gaps can be pretty substantial, and it just doesn't, I mean, I can show you on paper where you're actually ahead day one if you're enrolled on a program, even though you've got warranty coverage. When you're enrolled on a program, you actually have more value than you're paying into the program starting with day one. It's, you know, it's that, you know, these programs are that valuable.
So I see we're out of time, so we have maybe, Alistair, time for a few questions.
Yeah. I think we've got time for one question, if there's anyone in the room who wants that pressure.
Well, there is one question on Slido, and in fact, there are two related questions. What are the advantages of the OEM programs versus JSSI, and what are the advantages of JSSI versus the OEM programs? We're not going to take that question up here. I'm going to encourage you to talk to Phillip individually or one of the OEM representatives individually to get their take on why their program is better.
Brilliant. Thanks very much. Thank you.